All right, so welcome. This is a candidate interview with Marian Orr, candidate for Cheyenne mayor. Thanks for coming to visit with the Wyoming Tribune Eagle editorial board. We appreciate having you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
And for those watching the video later, I'm Brian Martin. I'm the managing editor of the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, and we have a couple of community reps with us today.
I'm Sharon Fang with Black Hills Energy. Sharon.
Bob Feck, Cheyenne Animals.
So Marian, thanks again for being here. Thanks for your interest in running for mayor, and we'll get started with what specific issues or concerns got you into the mayor's race this year.
Well, thanks for asking. It's I think probably what got me into the mayor's race was my interest in the vacated seats by former Councilman Valdez, and so I threw my my name in the hat for that. I was one of the 5 finalists. But over that period of time, I really started to look deeply into the community. I tended to work more on a statewide level as far as political issues, but really enjoyed learning about things like our community improvement plan, the employee investment survey. And so I thought, gosh, when the seats open, I really want to run for that. And in talking with other folks out in the community that I really respect well, they said, just go for mayor. And I thought, wow, I could do that. And I took some time, spoke to my family, and looked at the obligations that I had with my current clients, kind of where I was in my life, and just felt like it's a really good time. I've got growing children, and the time necessary to devote to this. I'm really enjoying this race so far.
What qualifications do you think that you bring to the table specifically that would make you a good mayor?
I have been working for over 20 years with individuals from business and government, both state government and municipalities, to work through issues of concern to them. And I have found that throughout the years, my skills are pretty much directed towards being a person to facilitate collaboration, being able to look at both sides of an issue, being able to disagree but not be disagreeable, and still be friends in the end. And I believe that those skills are very transferable to the position of mayor. I have heard out in the community and through messaging that Cheyenne doesn't need a lobbyist, but I actually think that that's probably what Cheyenne does need. We need somebody that is going to work really hard for the community of Cheyenne to make sure that when we do have items on, say, the State Land Investment Board, that there's that relationship with the 5 electeds, that there's relationships with the other cities, towns, and counties. And I believe that that's something that I bring to this.
Marian, what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the city? And if you could name 1 or 2.
Thanks. Right now, I would have to say the budget. Last night, the city council met. We put the budget through 2nd reading. And having grown up in Wyoming through booms and busts and being very aware of where we're at as far as state finances and what that means to communities like Cheyenne as far as how much or how less the legislature is going to be able to fund us. I'm very concerned that we seem to be increasing spending and not looking at cuts. They put forward a 2.5% raise for employees, and I believe, that's probably well merited, but that's, I believe, a Band-Aid for the salary and wage issues in the community. And I have some ideas that I can go into further as far as how I would take a look at that. But I think that the budget is going to be the biggest issue going forward.
Anything else?
Public safety. I'm very pleased that the City Council did address that. That was a top priority of mine. We really are at a critical issue, a critical state right now with not being able to keep the men and women that we're recruiting here. And I know that that's an expensive process. And if we have 5 positions that can't be filled, adding a few more was probably not the answer. So I'm very pleased with their decision to take those funds and instead increase the base salaries for our officers.
So there are clearly, the purpose of government is to provide essential government services. Have you defined in your own mind what are essential government services and what are 2nd tier or 3rd tier services?
Absolutely, I have. I believe that the basic role of government is just that: public health, safety, and welfare. And I believe that we need to put our needs before our wants, especially in these economic times. And so public safety, our police, we need to make sure our roads are safe. It's a real infrastructure issue, absolutely. Economic development, how we grow our community. Tourism is the number 2 economic sector in our state, and we need to look at expanding our tourism base beyond just the last 2 weeks of July. And so I believe public health, safety, and welfare, and that goes to our police, the sewer, the water, solid waste management, and our roads. And everything else from that's gravy. It's those are good quality of life would be second tier. In looking at what other counties have been doing recently, their 6 penny are not for, as lovely as our botanic gardens are, as wonderful as our greenway system are. Other counties, their 6 penny projects are for water and sewer. They're for their roads. They're using that 6th penny not for amenities, but for true needs within their community. And I think we really need to start to prioritize that. What do we want Cheyenne to be? What do we want it to look like? Instead of what I believe has been maybe happening in the past, and that's where everybody puts their pet projects on the table, and it's a matter of who's a little bit of a better lobbyist as far as their projects go, instead of everybody coming together saying, here are the needs, here's the mission of our community, and how does this fit within that mission and the values of what we want to be.
Marian, can you describe your overall vision for Cheyenne? If you step into the mayor's office, what do you envision for Cheyenne? What does Cheyenne need that it doesn't have right now? And how would you make that happen?
What I believe we're lacking right now is somebody to pull all of the pieces together. There are some that think that the mayor is the CEO for the city, and actually that's not the way our community works, and that's not the way our structure works. I really kind of see it as a 3-legged stool, and we've had one of those legs and a couple of those legs maybe be uneven at times, and we've been wobbly and not sturdy. And so what I believe the vision of whoever takes this seat needs to have is to be able to bring in the city council, work with the city council. City council, they're part-time. And so it's the mayor's role to be able to provide as much information and as many probable solutions to issues out there. So bring them in. The mayor's office, along with the administration, is that second stool, or that second leg to the stool. And the community, our Chamber of Commerce, leads, the South Cheyenne Economic Development, all of those economic and business entities are that third leg to the stool. And I believe that if we're going to truly drive Cheyenne forward, it's going to take a mayor that is willing to make all of that come together. I hope I answered that well.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you expand a little more about, are there specific things that you think that Cheyenne doesn't have that it ought to have, whether they be amenities or something related to quality of life or something maybe beyond government? What's your vision for Cheyenne as a community?
Beyond amenities, I want to come back to the budget. And what I believe that Cheyenne is lacking is looking forward past just the projects that we're funding. I believe that we should take a look at something very similar to what the state did and establish a permanent trust for that which we're building today. So we take that corpus, we grow it, we build it, we use the interest to take care of the facilities 5, 10, 15 years down the road. We don't have that as a community. We can do that. It's perfectly acceptable and allowable in our state statute to be able to do that. And I would start with the overages for the 5th and 6th penny. I believe that we have been negligent in spending those and not saving those. And I believe it would go a long way to the taxpayer that I think rightfully questions and possibly criticizes what happens to those overages. How are those tax dollars spent? And so I believe that that's something right away that we could start. As far as what Cheyenne looks like, I think that we as a community are very disjointed again in our neighborhoods. We've got each ward fighting against the other, and we need to bring our neighborhoods together. There are so many that when I was having lunch and breakfast at the Diamond Horseshoe, I heard so many people say, wow, I never knew that existed. Well, Margaret's been serving breakfast there for over 40 years. I mean, it's a fantastic place, but I think we all get a little complacent in our own community circles. The other thing that it looks like as far as economic development is a mayor, again, that works very closely with the council and with those economic development sectors, not only locally, but with the state to determine Cheyenne's future and Cheyenne's role. We actually, I believe, even though we're in an economic downturn, Laramie County is more insulated, obviously, than Campbell County or Converse County. So in my opinion, that means that we are at the perfect time to kind of maybe sit back and say, okay, let's breathe, let's take a look at all of this, and let's map out what do we really want things to look like. You know, once oil goes above $60 a barrel, there's some real opportunities in Laramie County for some economic development growth. So what do we want? What do we want that to look like? And so that we're not being reactionary when that does happen. And we've actually thought through those.
Marian, what supervisory or management experience do you have, and how would it apply to serving as mayor? You've talked about some of your transferable skills with your statewide, with the lobbying and the clients. What about the supervisory management experience?
My advisement, or excuse me, my experience in supervisor management, years ago, I was the executive director for the CPA Society, had a very small staff. But, you know, I had to, you know, manage the budgets, manage, you know, membership of hundreds of individuals throughout the state. So I've had to do some hiring and firing on my own, but more recently, when you work with Fortune 500 companies and larger companies that want to come into the state and have conversations, that is supervising, that is managing. It's managing those discussions. It's being able to say, you know what, you need to be quiet at this meeting and listen and maybe step back, but being able to, you know, to have those kind of conversations, and obviously in a respectful way. So I think that what I do every day is managing people.
How would you work to improve the building development process, especially as it relates to downtown, but maybe in general? There's been quite a bit of criticism, and of course there's been the split between the planning and development departments. But what's your position on that? What more do you think still needs to be done to improve the building development process in Cheyenne?
So the Uniform Development Code is an evergreen document. It needs to continually be looked at, and I believe that we're starting to do that, but it's also not a one-size-fits-all, in my opinion. We need to look at making common sense decisions for how we want our neighborhoods and our communities to look and feel. In regards to downtown, I personally looked at buying a historic home that had been changed with zoning to business, and we wanted to live in the upstairs portion of it. But then I would have to go to city council and get a zoning change, and then who wants to take that economic risk of buying a piece of property and then not being able to do with it what you want to? That's a problem. We need to address that. On day one of my administration, I would create a task force, and I love that people in the community have already come up to me and said, hey, if you're mayor, I want to be a part of this. Using the talents, and what's great is this costs no money as far as just getting the right heads around the table, bringing in commercial developers, bringing in title company specialists can research who actually owns that piece of property, bringing in lawyers. What legal ramifications can we take? And again, looking at the codes that we currently have, are we even enforcing them? Are we sending the owner of the Z's building a bill every week for the plowing of the sidewalk? Are we sending them fines and fees? I mean, we could be thorns in their side just by sheer mail and extra fees, and we have not done that. And so that is something that I believe we can tackle. We haven't done it. We have urban forestry. I don't know how many people are aware of this. Urban forestry created a map of all of the trees in the community, and you can zoom onto a tree. It'll tell you the species, when it was last pruned, tell you everything about that tree. It's fantastic. We can do that with our buildings. We can do that with our commercial sector. We can take a look at it and we can essentially create a tiered system and determine, okay, this building is okay right now, but is possibly endangered. And this one in the future, this is a problem that needs to be remedied now, and go through those discussions. But other communities are doing this, and we can be doing this. We should be doing this.
Is there anything that you're hearing about the current process as it relates to city staff, city administration that you think needs to be improved? Do you think the split of those departments improve the situation, or is there more that still needs to be done?
I'm hearing that the split was not the answer to the problem. I'm hearing that the issue was more about inspections. I am hearing that there are certain individuals within the city office that are fantastic to work with, are real gems, and I'm hearing that then there are others that really are lacking in some customer service skills. And I believe that if a developer knocks on the door and wants to build or wants to enhance our community, we need to say, hey, welcome. What can we do to help you? Let us help you get through these. You know, we say you need 5 shrubs and there's only really room for 4. Okay, let's go for 4. We need to be better with our developers. Absolutely. I'm disappointed that there's not, I believe it's the planning office right now that is lacking an administrator over that office. And I understand that somebody probably doesn't want to take that position for 6 months because it's an appointed position. I think that possibly needs to be revisited as far as, you know, should they be appointed or should they be employees? Can they be a protected class? But as far as the actual split, I believe it was costly, and I don't know that it was the right answer. But I certainly I need to know more, and not until I'm in office and would meet with everybody and find out. Okay, yeah, it does make sense to keep them separate, and let's find the right people for the right jobs. I'm open to that too, but I'm hearing that things have not been fixed.
If what you're hearing is that you have the wrong people in those jobs, what do you as mayor do about it?
What I do, what my role would be to sit down with those individuals and find out what it is they like about their job. What do they not like about their job? What are their skill sets? I mean, sometimes people switch into jobs and maybe don't necessarily find out, or they find out later it wasn't the right fit. I've had clients before where I thought, gosh, maybe that wasn't the right fit for me and for them, and so we both have moved on. But I find that expectations need to be made, and if expectations of our employees are not being met, then they need to find someplace else to work, and not necessarily within the city building.
You had mentioned the 6 penny and budgeting and a few other things. I wanted to ask your thoughts on the use of taxpayer money for amenities like the Children's Museum. What are your thoughts on that?
On the 7th penny specifically?
Well,
Or just in general?
just in
7th penny.
general.
Okay, so the 7th
Six,
penny,
seven.
right, so the 7th penny is an economic development. It's supposed to be used for economic development. And yes, statutorily, that's very vague. I have come out and I still am very opposed to putting the Children's Museum on a ballot. It started off, it is. It's a private nonprofit. The museum started off at $11 million. A year later, it was $22 million. I questioned that fiscal planning. Their fundraising has fallen short, and I don't believe it's just because of the downturn in the economy. I think that investors are really questioning the rise in costs and possibly the location. I think that they're going to have a really hard time going much further beyond that $5 million. That being said, museums don't make money. The Children's Discovery Center in Fort Collins lost $800,000 last year. They lost $600,000 the year before. Museums are wonderful, but I don't know that they're economic drivers. I think that what we should look at would be, a 7th penny something that truly does drive economic development. Amenities, again, are important, but when other counties around the state are looking at their infrastructure needs, and if you bring in a new physician, say to Cheyenne Regional Medical Center, and you take them on a tour through Cheyenne, and you hit all of the potholes, and potholes are not filling potholes is not the answer to the streets. We've got to fix the streets. It's a much bigger problem. To me, that's economic development. I mean, to me, that's an amenity. Having nice roads. Sadly, we don't have that. I would love that. I blew out a tire early this spring, and I feel for everybody. So I, again, really believe it's about putting needs over wants. But again, what's beautiful about the process is it goes to the voters. The Sixth Penny, I believe, has done amazing things for this community. The Botanic Gardens, I mean, what a rock star amenity for this community. There's really nothing like it. And when it's finished, in talking with Shane Smith, there are actually some revenue potentials. So again, let's look at how can we build trust funds, essentially, for that which we build, so that in 15 years, when the carpet needs to be replaced, those funds exist. The library, another fantastic example of Sixth Penny funds. The new and much needed, and again, I believe this is a public need and not an amenity, but the Joint Communication Center, the police and fire. I mean, those are things that that are important. And you know, the Greenway was out on a section of it for a walk. I can't remember which one. There have been so many fundraisers every weekend, but went through the Greenway, and it was a section of town that I hadn't been on. And I mean, how fantastic that whole system is. But how do we maintain it? How do we mow? How do and that's my biggest question. If we put things on the table to grow and build, we need to recognize and we need to ask hard questions. How do we take care of it in the future? Not only equipment, but personnel. Another question that I have is the proposed, ice rink downtown and the spray park. Those are lovely amenities, but who's going to clean up after it? I mean, who's going to scrub down the bottom of that when it gets kind of gross? I was meeting, and actually I met a couple of the gentlemen that work on our Clean and Safe crew, and it was the Hispanic festival, and there are 5 people on their crew, and they do split shifts. So on Friday, they work from 8 until noon, and then they are off, and then they come back and work from 5 to 11 to take care of the plaza. So 5 people take care of the plaza over the weekends, and then they're also in charge of cleaning up the Cox and the Spiker, the garages, as well as helping out with everything else kind of downtown, cleaning it up. That particular weekend, there were only 2 of them because of illness, time off, and somebody else might have been on vacation, but there were 2 of them to do that. So if we have a spray park, if we have an ice skating rink, who takes care of that? Who facilitates that? And maybe it's the DDAs, maybe they hire their own people. I don't know that as far as the ownership of it has really been addressed, and maybe I need to dig further and find that out. But does that become the responsibility of the city, or is it the DDA?
We talked a little bit about the Children's Museum being a nonprofit. There's general fund money and sales tax money that both go through the United Way to a series of nonprofits.
Right.
Do you support or not support that?
I think that, again, that is something that really needs to be looked at as far as needs versus wants. I support that they need funding. Again, we need to find out if it's equitable. I mean, the Kamea shelter would like as much money as the Cheyenne Elemental Shelter, as would Youth Alternatives. And so I think that we need to actually take a really hard look at that. are the homeless issue and the needs that we have in this community. I think most of our citizens have no idea the poverty issues that we have in this community. And so service organizations like United Way are very good at identifying it. In fact, I was on a program evaluation team when I first moved to Cheyenne. And I remember touring the Cometa shelter. I was expecting a child at the time, and I thought, wow, I mean, there are kids that are, living out of cars, and it was very eye-opening. So United Way, in particularly, I believe, does a very good job of being very good stewards of those resources. Cheyenne is very different in that we fund things that other communities don't. Youth Alternatives is a good example. It's a very good service that we provide for the community. We are one of the only cities where that exists. It's privatized in most communities. Do I think we need to do that? I wouldn't make that rash decision, but I think that those are questions that need to be asked. If we as a city cannot pay counselors a high enough salary to be a counselor compared to private organizations, say Peak Wellness Center, perhaps we partner with Peak. Perhaps we do look at, instead of spending X amount of dollars at Youth Alternatives, perhaps we contract with Peak Alternatives to provide the same services, but not necessarily as a city employee, if that makes sense. That's my thought on that.
Marian, will you talk to us about your thoughts about the city-owned Belvoir Ranch and the push by some folks to get it opened to the public for recreational or other purposes? Your
Sure.
thoughts about Belvoir?
I jumped on the Belvoir bandwagon right away when I saw essentially the big whole portion of it. That for recreational opportunities is really quite fantastic. It wasn't until I learned the other issues involved that I actually stepped back. And one of the things as mayor, I am not afraid to admit that I'm wrong. And I think I was really wrong on this. It's not a matter of just opening up the gate because of the issues we have with the Army Corps of Engineers to clean up the plumes for the TCE that's out there. There are fears by some, and I think that they're probably well-founded, that if we suddenly open it up and allow the public, then the federal government, the Army Corps of Engineers will step back and say, you really don't need us to fix this. You don't believe that it's a problem anymore. So I believe that we need to continue to push for them to take care of that problem. And in talking with officials that have been going to those quarterly meetings with the Army Corps, they've actually come a lot further than they have over the past years. I know that Senator Barrasso's office has really been pushing. There are thousands of those kind of sites throughout the country, but the Belvoir Ranch has really been identified as one to it's top of the list. And I think that we need to be very careful and not shoot ourselves in the foot as far as overreacting. Do we need the Belvoir Ranch? We do, and I believe it's for the purpose of water. Recreation is secondary, but I believe that that was a good purchase. Water is a huge issue for us, and the water that's there. Unfortunately, we've got the great treatment plant to take care of any kind of contaminants, but I believe that was a good investment.
Belvoir fits into a variety of different things you've talked about before, but can you prioritize, or have you prioritized already, your budget and savings priorities? Do you have things that are bigger priorities for you for city funds? But from your perspective, stepping in as mayor, what would you fund first? What would you save money for? And where do these things kind of rank for you? You talked a little bit about that, but kind
Sure.
of can you expand on that?
Absolutely. So, coming in January, the mayor will have the budget that's been established. But what we're going to be finding in January is a continued decrease in our sales tax revenue. And so, what that is going to mean are some cuts and some efficiencies. And there are identifiable in talking with different administrators throughout the city, there are things that we can look at. For instance, our fleet, our motor pool fleet, we have 800 in our fleet with 580 some employees. There are some cars that only get a couple hundred miles a year on them. Why do we have that vehicle? You know, why can't we use Enterprise, rent a car for a trip to Casper for Wyoming Association of Municipalities meeting? You know, let's look at that. Let's look at you know, and I know that these are city jobs, but boy, couldn't we contract out you know, maintenance on the vehicles? Do we have to do it internally? So let's really take a look at is what we're doing, could that be more cost effectively done using private sector? One of the things that that I asked, and I think it's a budgeting issue, and how things are or are not taken into account for, and that is maybe just simply mowing. You know, if how often do we mow the park? Do we mow once a week? Do we mow every other week? If we were to cut down from twice a month to, you know, once every how many days? What kind of cost savings would that be? And not until do we know how much we're spending, do we know where some efficiencies can be drawn in. But I believe that if asked, and I have asked, I believe that we've got some really good city administrators and city employees that know exactly what could go away. So I would start there. Our roads have to be our number one priority. The potholes are a problem, a systemic problem of the fact that our roads are not good. I've heard that there are people question, you know, why is it that things just don't last as long as they used to? I mean, some roads, what's the life expectancy? And do we look at, again, the compounded mixtures being used for the cement? Are we asking the tough questions again? But I'm willing to do that. But I think our roads, again, that comes to public safety, making sure that fire and police, another perfect example of how we have not saved well enough. Our fire stations, we're not doing regular maintenance on this. They've got carpet that I wouldn't want in my house, you wouldn't want in your house, and yet these men and women are, you know, living there on their, and it's ridiculous that we as a community, if we're going to start looking outside at blight, we need to look at our own facilities that we're maintaining. We're not maintaining them, and the money simply is not there. We have $48 million of funds that need to be spent for maintenance over the next 5 years. Deferred maintenance, $48 million. Where do we find that? We have some really serious budget issues ahead of us.
I believe right now we spend about $4 million a year on roads, and Vicki Nemechek's estimate is it needs to be about $3 million more than that.
Correct.
Where do you get that?
I don't know that, but I think that that's a good question to ask. And yes, I believe that it's a good question to ask. I believe that bids need to be taken into account for. You know, we've got a system where, you know, low bids win, but bids also can be written where certain specifications have to be met. And so I think it's a matter of not just saying, okay, we want you to build this road from X to Z, but, you know, putting in the bid specs, you know, possibly tightening down as far as material use, or I don't know, but I think that I think some again, some tough questions need to be asked, and they may very well have the answer. I mean, it may be 7 million, but it's good to investigate.
Speaking of roads,
Yes.
Christensen,
Right.
what do you think of Christensen Road?
Well, that's an economic development tool piece, I believe. That, I believe, would be a 6th or 7th penny appropriate build. And with those, there are always developers that are going to see a profit from roads going out into their communities. But that's a fact of life. that's that partnership of working with developers and the community and the needs of the community and access. And access is a big issue.
That really dovetails right into the next part of it, which is the sixth penny. You've talked about prioritizing needs over wants and roads being important. Fifth penny has traditionally been seen as the roads sales tax, sixth penny for specific amenities. If you were to sit down and create your sixth penny priorities list right now, what would that list look like from number one down the list?
It would be roads. It would be solid waste, landfill. It would be water and sewer. And again, that dovetails into the roads. And when you break up a road, you better take care of the water, sewer, and other infrastructure needs on that. Those would be my priorities. And also taking into account that not only do we need to bring our neighborhoods together within the city, but the mayor needs to work very closely with the county commissioners in planning that too, because it's not just our sixth penny, it's the county, it's Auburn, Burns, Carpenter, Pine Bluffs. They all have needs on that too. And so I think in my history in working with the sixth penny purpose tax or the spot tax, really it's hard for voters to stomach going out much longer than 4 years as far as a project. Not only the voters, but also the communities, because you don't know what's going to crop up. And you can't wait, say, 6 years for utility corridors to be built or something like that. And those are projects that our communities, if you look at what Auburn, Burns, and Pine Bluffs puts on the sixth penny, they have real needs.
So let's just say $3 million a year, 6 years, $18 million sixth penny ballot issue for Cheyenne roads.
Right.
How are you going to sell that to the commissioners, to the Pine Bluffs, to the Burns people? Why would they vote for that?
They should vote for it because they come into our community every day and use our roads. The jobs are here, the activities are here, their amenities are here, they come in to shop here, and they are using our roads every day. That's how that gets sold.
Is there room on that ballot for other amenities then, or is it all infrastructure from your perspective? Do you think we need to stop building the extra things, the botanic gardens, the library, the possible rec center, any of those sort of things with six penny, and focus on infrastructure for a while?
You know, I believe that there is room for amenities on there. I was always a bit surprised that the rec center hadn't passed. I just took a look at how Laramie is doing with their rec center, and they are actually faring very well as far as their cost loss ratio. Rec centers generally within Wyoming are between 30 and 60% cost loss. Laramie's at 80. They're doing really well. And so if something like a rec center was to be built, I want to go over and talk to Laramie. And I think a lot of people would go over to talk to Laramie and find out what they're doing right. Their ice and event center is probably much like ours. It needs subsidies and doesn't make as much money as I think that they're like between a 30 and 50% cost loss ratio when I last checked. And so there is room for amenities. The other, but again, it comes back to our buildings. Our municipal building, if anybody's walked into it, even to pay a parking ticket, it's hello 1970, you know, and of course it's not popular for any mayor or any city council person to say, you know what, my working conditions need to be a little bit brighter and less fluorescent and less avocado green. That's hard to sell to the voters, but it's a building that we own that needs some work. Same thing with, and it's controversial as far as, you know, the Civic Center. How well does the Civic Center do? Well, the Civic Center actually makes money. In going through the budget in some of the past years, they do well, and it's a good amenity for the community. And you know, and that's a facility that we probably need to look at. The whole West Edge development. Let's start looking at that and what that does. You know what? And that comes back to seventh penny. That's economic development. Let's use seventh penny to grow that west edge. And a children's museum might be a lovely thing to put on that west edge over past, say, the library and drawing that in. So those are good examples of, I think, needs over wants within the community.
How do you feel about possible anti-discrimination ordinance for Cheyenne? Is it something that's needed?
I believe it is needed. I came out kind of right out of the gate in support of a non-discrimination ordinance. I worked on the state legislation. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, and we got pretty far. My preference would be for the state to take care of it. I really, and again, as mayor, the mayor needs to be a lobbyist, and I would work with the other mayors to pressure our state officials to say, our community members want this. We need your help to make it statewide. We cannot have a patchwork system of codes throughout our state. We just can't. We really need, this is one of those areas where this is the role of the state. And obviously not every mayor would get on board with that, but the mayors of Laramie and Jackson and possibly other areas that are looking at it, I bet that they all want a standardized state uniform code to work off of.
Having a family yourself, you said your kids are grown, but you've been here in the community a while. What amenities does Cheyenne need for families and also for young professionals that it doesn't have right now?
Boy, with my kids growing up, what we don't need is the wind, but we can't obviously do anything about that. I really believe that the community's done a great job as far as developing the soccer fields and the parks. I'm hearing more of a need for courts, for basketball courts. Part of the problem lies in that we used to, I believe as a community, really be able to work well with our schools to use their facilities. And probably for their budgetary issues as well. From what I understand, that doesn't really exist so much anymore. And gyms within the community are really hard to find. It's hard to find indoor facilities for baseball and for softball. And so I think an indoor courts that could be used during those horribly dreadful, January through May months would really go a long way. I've heard some talk about a private developer actually coming in and looking at doing that. So I don't know that it always necessarily needs to be the role of government to provide that. If a private developer has a model that they could come in and provide something like that, that'd be great. I love to golf. I'd love to see like a Top Golf here. Do I think that that's the role of government to provide an indoor golf range? I don't think so. But our community has a lot. As far as young professionals, downtown is doing a really good job, I think, of creating an environment for millennials to come down and stay and hang out. I'm hearing good things about that. I'm also hearing from the young professionals that the parts of Cheyenne just look dirty. That whole west. In fact, I threw a impromptu kind of town hall in the parking lot of what I refer to now as the itching pods, the old hitching post. And actually, there were like 4 millennials. 2 came on their bikes, 2 others stopped over their lunch break. They're like, this is disgusting. And everybody remembered when it used to be, the place to go to. But the millennials realized that parts of our town look dirty and dingy, and it's hard to attract people that want to come up and stay and play when parts of our community don't.
I heard you mention the hitching post before. What would you do as mayor to clean up that situation and some of these other areas that need to be cleaned up?
I would go again directly to the property owner and start taking a look at our ordinances, making sure I've got the right legal team behind me, but really start having those discussions to say this is not acceptable, and also what can we do to help you as a community? there might be, maybe it's a code issue. Maybe it is, if we were to repair this, and this is what I've heard more often than not, if we were to open this door or take down this wall, then we would have to do everything because of the codes. And at what point, I talked to one gentleman, he owns a demolition company, and he gave the owners a quote of $600,000 just to tear the whole thing down. And at what point do we work with those business owners to say, you know what, this piece of land, this lot is actually much more valuable with everything that's above the surface gone, and just have those discussions. And I'd be willing to bet that the other property owners to the west of them, those other new hotels that are really quite lovely and nice, would like to be part of those discussions too.
Other questions? Other issues, Marian, that we didn't talk about in our time
Thanks.
together so far?
No, this has really been it's been great. I really enjoyed the race so far, getting out in the community and meeting people and going to places that were new to me. And I think that as mayor, what I've learned is that there are so many people in our community that have so many great ideas, and they really believe that their voice hasn't been heard, or that their thoughts and ideas won't be taken into account, or that they're small and trivial. What I'm hearing is how fantastic it is to use social media to have some discussions about what's going on in our community. I will continue that. I will have quarterly town hall meetings out in the community, and ideally with the ward members of that area. I would go down to the South Community Park with Ward 1 City Council people and have, a pizza party, quarterly meeting, tell us your thoughts and concerns, but do that in every quarter of the community. I would start going out to Ward 1, I'd go Ward 2, Ward 3, the third quarter, and then back to City Hall for the fourth quarter. But I believe quarterly town hall meetings, I believe accessibility is so incredibly important. I believe in, transparency is the big buzzword. I believe it's about really, being open. I've heard from so many people saying, again, and this comes back to reserves from fifth and sixth penny. We as taxpayers don't mind paying for things as long as we know that that's where the money's going. If you need to divert it to another area, let us know. Let us know that there's that need. Let us know why that decision was made. And again, I come back to we need to start saving. I come back to the permanent trust fund with the state. We need to do that in the city. We have just think how better off we'd be if we had done this in the 80s, and things would look much differently. So this is my thoughts are not only what can I do for Cheyenne today, but what kind of things can I do and create that will make Cheyenne better for the next generation, for the next 20 years. And finally, I just believe in, again, really good government, accountability, not only fiscally being good stewards, but also really good customer service agents to the community of Cheyenne. And I believe that the mayor needs to work with and not against some of the different entities around the community, and with my role and my history and my skill set and what I know, I believe that I would be best to bring the community together.
Thank you, Marian. Thanks for your time today.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it. This was great.